Good evening and welcome to the, what is this, May edition of the Burlington Electric Commission meeting. It's held every second Tuesday of the month right here, 585 Pine Street, and we encourage all Burlingtonians, ratepayers, come on down and join the conversation with us. 5 o'clock, second Wednesday of the month. Here we go. So the first thing on our agenda is the agenda. Do we have any changes or deletions, additions, or anything like that of note?
You did see the slightly updated Energy Assistance Program Tariff from Emily. There was a slightly updated version that was just sent. I just wanted to note that for the commission.
I did not see that, but
I did, I saw it.
Yep.
It came in late this afternoon. Just a slight modification and a good one, which we can explain.
Okay.
sounds good.
Yeah.
All right. We're good with that? All right, let's, next up will be the minutes of the April 9th, 2025 meeting. And if there are any spelling errors and stuff like that, administrative stuff, we'll alert the clerk to that. Other than that, are there any substantive changes to the agenda? Hearing none, I will entertain a motion.
A motion to approve the minutes?
We have a motion, do I have a second?
I second.
Motion and seconded. All in favor of the minutes of April 9th, 2025, indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
All those against indicate by saying nay. Ayes have it. Minutes are passed. Excellent. Next up is public forum. This is a chance for you, the public out there, whoever's out there in here, to have a chance to chat with us or bring up concerns, thoughts, ideas, whatever. Is there anybody from the public? I don't see anybody here. Is there anybody online? No. Okay, so anyway, I'll repeat that. This is a second Wednesday of the month, 5 o'clock, right here, 585 Pine Street. Come on down and join the conversation with us. We would appreciate it. Helps to get feedback. All right, moving on from public forum, Commissioners' Corner. This is a chance for commissioners to kind of update us on whatever has been happening in their world and relative to the BED or whatever over the last month. Commissioner Bodo.
I have one item, and this is actually for Elena. I noticed that on the City of Burlington website, there's a page for the commission, and it has a couple inaccuracies on there.
Okay.
And so I wanted to flag this for you, and I could have just emailed you, but I just remembered now. It says that we meet at 5:30, and it also still lists your predecessor as the point of contact. So I'll shoot you a note for this, but I just
Okay.
wanted to flag that because I wouldn't want people to.
There's a separate page for it?
Yeah, I'll send it
Okay.
to you right now.
Thank you.
Thank you, that was it, Scott.
Okay.
I have one comment. So in my work as a regular person, we're doing some work on the new North End BTV plan, and I found out there are no EV chargers in the new North End.
No, there are.
There are public.
There are. Well, at the Hannafords, we have
Okay.
two level twos that are long-standing, actually. We have those, and then there are no fast chargers, if that was the
Okay, maybe
point.
that
Which
was-
we only have a few of them around the city. We have one downtown, one at the waterfront, one right here. So there's definitely no fast chargers, although we have plans to change that, of course. But we do at least have the level twos, and then we've incentivized some of the multifamily chargers through the program that we've had with the California company that does the software for the programming for multifamily. So we've had some of those in the New North End area as well. There's been requests, though, that we haven't been able to fully help with in some communities where they're not actually, the community has an interest in a charger,
Yep.
but there's not actually like a public space we can put one. So we've tried to support them with incentives and things like that. But at a minimum, we have the Hannafords ones.
Okay.
So if anybody's looking for level twos, we have those two.
Okay. Okay, yeah, I was curious about that because it is a big part of the city, and I think it's a big portion of the population as well that's in the new North End.
Yeah. Now, is that all underground such that we can't put any up like we do in the center of the city?
Oh, no, we can do the chargers, and, you could do pole mounted, where we do have some poles in the New North End for sure, but we primarily look at those where there may not be off-street parking options, and in a number, but not all places in the New North End, there are more off-street parking options. So we have more customers who might be using a charger in their, garage or outside of their home or whatever it might be. But I definitely agree. And like in the northern part of the new North End, there's not as much kind of public charging infrastructure as well.
Are there going to be any in the high school?
Yes, and we're also working, we've had an active conversation with the school district about trying to put level 2s in the school
Yep.
properties, and we have an active one right now with CP Smith,
Oh, okay.
where we're hoping to have a charger that would be available there. And, we can set different parameters, like, during the day, maybe it can be primarily used for people who are, parking for the school, but maybe in the evenings when there's less need for that lot, we can set it up more for residents who might be living nearby and might need a place to charge. If that's successful, we could certainly look at doing that with Flynn. We've also had some success with the Parks Department. Like we have a charger now at Oak Ledge that was set up with the Parks Department.
Right.
So could we do something like that at
Letty.
Star Farm or
Yeah.
Letty?
Yeah.
Absolutely.
The dog park, I would think, would be a good candidate.
Yeah,
too.
yeah. So we have some of that in our plans, our
Okay.
kind of 5-year
Okay.
charging plan. And we've definitely heard through the survey that there's some interest from some folks,
Yep.
in particular neighborhoods in the new North End as
Yep.
well. Obviously, the EV charging grant at the federal level will help us get that money out quicker, but it's regardless, we're going to try to continue to invest in that area.
Great.
But I appreciate the feedback.
Yeah. Yep.
Right on.
Something. This will be my first summer experiencing heat pump cooling,
Ah,
and first time for the house ever to have ducted cooling. So I'm curious and a little nervous, frankly, about what my summer's going to be like from a cost point of view and how cool am I going to be. But I'm committed and I'm excited by the opportunity to have cool air. I guess I'll push it back to BED to think about that experience for customers, especially new customers to heat pump technology. I think there's lots of opportunities to kind of guide people through the process. Converting people and getting them on board is one thing, but I think the use and best practices and here's some things you might encounter, kind of perspectives, especially with older homes.
right.
And we have a lot of older homes in the city of Burlington. I think that's an opportunity for Burlington Electric to engage customers
Yeah.
around the technology and educate.
I will mention now, which is something I would have mentioned maybe during the update, that our triennial customer survey is out right now. We're encouraging folks to take it. And there are a number of questions in the heat pump space, because we do want to learn, customer has a heat pump, great. What kind? You mentioned ducted, or there's ductless, there are different kinds, they work different temperatures. Are you using it for heating and cooling, or just cooling, or a little bit of both? And if so, sort of how? Because one of the things we've worked actively to do is we want to encourage customers to use it for heating as much as possible, because that's where we get the fossil fuel reduction. But it's great for cooling. My own experience, which is just anecdotal for me, and we don't have ductless, or we have ductless, not the ducted, is the delta in the outdoor to indoor temperature in the summertime is maybe, going to be 10 to 20 degrees, depending on what you're setting your thermostat at. So the cost relative to the wintertime is going to be pretty low for air conditioning. It's very efficient. So really the more of the spike you might see in your bill that's more noticeable would certainly be in the heating season if you're running the heat pump as a primary heating unit. Hopefully you're seeing offsetting reductions in your gas bill as well. But be curious about your experience too. But I did want to just flag the survey as another kind of way that we're going to get input from customers around that. And I think there's a lot of process going on around heat pumps at the state level too, trying to understand, we have assumptions on how they do in terms of fossil fuel reduction, but are customers using them for heating and cooling? And if so, are we getting the savings that we want to get? So it's a good point. We're definitely interested in that. I'd like to hear your report out after
I will be happy
after the
to
summer,
report.
see how it goes. Yeah, thank you.
Nice. Nothing?
So exciting for me.
Yeah. Yes, all right. We don't have any other Commissioners Corner stuff? That was great, thank you guys, that was awesome. We'll move on to item number 5, the General Manager update with General Manager Springer.
Great. So Mike has helpfully reminded me that we are going to have some Lake Monsters be night at the ballpark events coming up. The 18th of June and the 2nd of July, if I'm remembering correctly. Both are 6:35 p.m. games. We will have some well, we're with VGS at these games, so we're going to have BED and VGS Lake Monsters hats for some of those games to give out to customers. We'd welcome the commissioners to join us. I think we're hoping to have an opportunity for the mayor to throw out a first pitch, maybe on the 18th, if we can make that happen, at the Lake Monster game for BED night. So mark your calendars for that. Also, in the mark your calendar space, we have a new date for the Net Zero Energy Festival this year. This is exciting. We're going to, for the first time, hold the festival a few weeks earlier and do it during Art Hop.
Oh, fun.
So we're coordinating with the South End Arts District, and we've been a supporter and sponsor of Art Hop for a number of years, and we're kind of well positioned, I think, in the space to draw a much bigger crowd. So we're working actively to have some new and exciting activities as part of the festival, as well as some old favorites in terms of some of the things that we'll do. But we're really excited to potentially reach a much larger audience. So the Saturday is September 6th, I think. Ita gave me the yes. September 6th, rain or shine, we will be out here from 10 to 2 for the 4th annual Net Zero Energy Festival, now a part of Art Hop, which is exciting. On to some of the highlights from the report. We were able to work with Renewable Energy Vermont and UVM to host this first ever Electrify Vermont Summit as part of Research Week at UVM. It was great. I think we actually had more interest than we had space, so we'll probably have to look if we do this again for a bigger space. But we did a tour at the Georgia Mountain wind turbines in the morning. I hadn't been up there in a couple of years. It was good to go there. Incidentally, there's probably space for an additional turbine up there if they were able to locate one. And we're, as you know, always in the market for renewable power, particularly close to home. So I certainly expressed that if there was some ability to add to the power there, we would be interested in talking about that. But we had a great tour, number of folks from around the state who came and visited. And then we had a little demo, which you'll also see if you come to the Lake Monster game. We are doing a new thing where we have our F-150 Lightning electric truck, and we plug in some cooking technology to sort of showcase the camping mode, so to speak, of the F-150. So we had some chocolate on boil, and we had pretzels for dipping. And we were able to demo that at the Electrify Vermont Summit. VGS also has an F-150 Lightning, and I think they had some sort of like strawberry fountain. They were trying to one-up us a little bit there, so we'll have to watch out for that. But we appreciate their partnership in demoing the technology. And we had a really good policy discussion conversation. The mayor was part of the kickoff, along with Kirk Dombrowski from UVM. We had Christina Garcia, who leads residential electrification for Con Ed in New York City, who we've worked with in the past as part of Building Electrification Institute, be our keynote. And then we had a couple of panels. And one of my primary interests in this event is we really don't have an electrification industry, so to speak, voice in Vermont. You think about all the different entities we work with, the incentive programs for e-bikes, for EVs, for heat pumps, for induction cooking, you name it. These are all discrete kind of industries, electric lawnmowers, battery storage. And so the idea here was like pull them all together in a room as best we could and really have a conversation about what does this industry look like and what does the industry as a whole need to partner, to grow, to be a bigger part of our climate solutions going forward. And that's a conversation I'd be interested to continue and grow. So we're hopeful to be able to build on this. We're going to have a debrief call with Renewable Energy Vermont and UVM and us and see where we can go and take this for next year. But wanted the commission to be aware of that effort. And hopefully we'll have a bigger space next year, and maybe we have some of the commission and others join us for it. It sold out, like it was free tickets, but it sold out in much quicker period of time than we expected, which was great.
Who attended? Was it students or?
No, primarily it was like practitioners in the space, folks on the Renewable Energy Vermont and Efficiency Vermont lists were, we sent it out through both of those channels. There were some researchers, certainly from UVM, but I'd say that the predominant audience was folks who are either practitioners or on those lists from Efficiency Vermont and Renewable Energy Vermont. We had a contingent from the utilities as well, from around the state. I think we had every utility sponsor the event, so everybody, Velco, VGS, all the electric utilities sent folks to be a part of it as well. So bigger and better next year, I hope. Speaking of batteries, I think you all got to see, we had a little test demo out here last meeting. We had a couple of smaller batteries. We've worked with that same company, Verity, and negotiated to have a larger battery, 1.2 megawatt, 240 kWh discharge per hour, so 240 kilowatts per hour discharge that we'll have on site here at 585 Pine from June through September. And the idea will be to capture the monthly peaks as we go, but also hopefully to capture the annual peak. Even with 1.2 megawatts, it's only going to discharge 240 kilowatt hours in a given hour, so it's going to have some impact, but not as dramatic an impact as we would want on the peak. But it'll be a good demonstration opportunity, a good partnership opportunity, and we'll have it in a place where we can hopefully show it to you next meeting. So keep an eye out for that. I don't have anything to report on the McNeil negotiations other than just to note that they were extended through July 15th, and we'll keep the commission up to date on any developments there. I think I put in here we were finalizing contracts. I think they're actually both done now with the two vendors. They had to go through a number of processes that the city requires. So we have our forestry vendor and our emission reduction vendor as of literally this afternoon now signed and under contract. So we'll host some kickoff meetings, and I've talked with the TUC about having them come to a TUC meeting and just listen in to any feedback that the public might offer at some future meeting, could be in June. And then obviously we'll continue to develop the work product with them and hopefully have something more to share, maybe in July is my hope. Also in July at TUC, we're going to be engaged with Synapse, separate from our roadmap project, on some follow-up analysis to the energy benchmarking policy that the city passed, looking at costs and benefits of different strategies for future policy in the mid-size commercial space around efficiency and emission reductions there. So Synapse is going to do some analysis. We've looped in the TUC members who are interested in this, and we're hopeful we'll have something to present in July around that at the TUC meeting. We're certainly happy to share that here as well. So stay tuned for that. And I think that's everything I had here in the report. Glad to answer any other questions there might be.
Anybody?
Nope, looks great.
I'm just going to add to that. The department has requested next meeting to start at 6 instead of 5. Is that possible for everyone? The request's been made.
Should be a lighter
Next
agenda,
month.
if that
It's a
helps.
fast agenda.
Yeah,
I don't think
this
it's
is a very long agenda tonight, so we won't have as much next month,
Okay.
certainly.
We do 6 o'clock next month?
Sure.
So,
There we go.
Thank you very much.
I do have a question for Darren. Darren, is there any update on the EEC fund proceeding? We got an update on that last month, and I'm not sure if we're still in our comment period, but if there's anything you can share on that, I'd be interested.
Absolutely. So we had a filing from the department in that docket that raised a couple of issues that were even beyond the scope of that docket, but other issues that they had referenced. And we actually went down and met with the department, commissioner and staff, and our team in person a couple weeks ago. We had some follow-up there. We filed, I think it was the last comment that we had to file in that docket, where we in the department, I think, agree on the variety of steps moving forward for addressing the deficiency that was identified and how to calculate for future years. And so the department could choose to file additional comments, but I think we worked with them in a manner where they feel good about our response. And if they don't have anything else to file, we would expect the next action would be a PUC action, not a comment from any of the parties.
Thank you.
Yep, absolutely.
Any other questions for the general manager update? We'll move on to item number 6, which is our financial review with Emily Stebbins-Wheeler. And it looks like she's going to be on the stand for a while.
You can park right
gonna
there.
make myself
Get comfortable.
Okay, good evening. These are the financial results for March 2025. The month of March, we had an actual net loss of $331,000 compared to a budgeted net loss of $418,000, so a positive variance. Even though it's still a net loss, we did better than budget by $87,000. Running down the significant variances from the top, sales to customers, another above budget month for sales revenues, which is great. Over budget by $227,000. Other revenues are mostly EEU reimbursements this month, positive variance of $69,000. Not a rec delivery month, so no rec revenues budgeted nor received. Moving down to expenses, operating expenses, net power supply was $199,000 worse than budget. Within there, we had fuel savings from McNeil running less than budget, more than offset by unfavorable purchase power expense. In addition to McNeil being under budget, 2 of our 3 wind resources produced more than was budgeted. And transmission was also unfavorable in March by $134,000. In the rest of operating and maintenance expense, we had a negative variance to budget of about $100,000, $105,000. And below the line in other income and deductions, also around $100,000 variance, this time favorable. We had more interest income. We had some timing of customer contributions coming in and a little bit of unrealized gain on investment. And then year to date, we are at an actual net income of $2.6 million or $2.7 million as compared to a budget of $3.6, so an $893,000 negative variance to budget for the year to date.
So I thought last month you said that some of this stuff was going to get washed out. There was like some negative.
Yeah, so as we'll discuss later,
Okay.
there was an issue we had with Q3 2024 McNeil Rex.
Okay.
And so therefore, we did not deliver Rex in February as budgeted for some of our 2024 deliveries. Policy and planning team has since acquired replacement Rex and is in the process of delivering on those Rex. It just didn't happen yet in March. So you'll see some rec revenues coming in April, as well as some that they're like working on now that will come in May.
Okay, so that
So-
will help with the 900,000.
Correct.
Yeah,
That's right.
okay.
Go to the next page. So capital spending, March year-to-date, we're at $7 million compared to a budget through March of about $9.5 million, and we're about 60% of the full year budget.
Before you get too deep into that, I got a question.
Mhm.
It bothers me all the time, but this month particularly, just because of the size of it. I hate buying power from ISO New England. And so how do we, I mean, when those prices are against us, how do we mitigate that? Or can't we, I mean, maybe I'm oversimplifying, which I'm sure I'm oversimplifying.
Are you looking at the
Um,
transmission?
Or
Or-
power, just,
You were looking on this one?
yeah, back in the first page.
Uh-huh.
How do we mitigate that, or how do we, I mean, when we're being charged from the outside a large, can't we just turn
So-
on McNeil to, I don't-
No.
Help me understand why,
Yeah, it doesn't work that way. Sorry.
I didn't think it
And-
did.
But this doesn't show you that, just so you know, by the way. You would need a more granular presentation to see if we were actually a net buyer or a net seller to ISO New England. That does not show that. And did it?
Not on the income statement, but on the
No,
supporting
but I'm saying
detail.
On the slide that you had on screen, I wasn't seeing that.
I'm just letting the
Okay.
commissioners know that in their packet, there's a detailed slide on net power supply that does show that.
And if it shows that, I mean, first of all, Scott, you're always buying from ISO New England because you always have to buy your entire load obligation from ISO New England, regardless of whatever assets and resources you may have. So buying from ISO New England is not optional. It is mandatory. You then sell your resources to ISO New England. And if the net of those two is a charge, then even then you can't absolutely say you were a net buyer or a net seller because the prices aren't the same depending upon time of day and where load is and where resources are. So in any given, right now for the budget, for example, for budget FY26, we are forecasted to be a slight provider of energy to ISO New England across the year. But that's not the same as saying in every single month and every single hour that will be true. And there's no good way to make that true.
Thank you, that helps.
No problem. Thanks, James.
And you wouldn't want to turn on McNeil if McNeil was uneconomical in that hour,
Right.
simply to create an excess position. So again, the fact that McNeil can be dispatched when it's economical and turned off when it's not economical is actually a significant advantage. That McNeil, the only assets we have that are really McNeil and our gas turbine.
Yeah.
Good.
Thank you.
Thanks, James. So then moving down to cash, we had total operating cash as of the end of March of 10.2 million. That compares to our budgeted cash position for this month of 10.7 million, so about $500,000 off from budget. And the ratios, the credit rating factors, debt service coverage ratio 5.08, adjusted debt service coverage ratio 1.32, and 152 days cash on hand, including the line of credit.
You have a question, Ed?
I do have a question. The overage in the capital spending on the production side,
Mhm.
where it's a actual 2.8 million on a budget of 2.4 million. You state the reasons, and I just had a clarifying question about that. You talk about the catalyst replacement for NOx system at the McNeil plan of 450,000 versus 225,000. And that explains 225,000 of the gap. But where is the other, the cost, the higher than expected cost and unfavorable timing for Winooski 1?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. So the actual expense of 2.875 million is not net of any FEMA reimbursement because the
Okay.
FEMA reimbursement hadn't arrived as of March. So in
Okay.
the April results, we'll see that production actual number go down because it will be offset by the grant income that's helping to cover that expense.
Thank you.
Mhm.
And then I just have a follow-up question, and I probably should have emailed this ahead of time. But how that kind of popped out with the catalyst replacement costing twice what it was budgeted for? And I'm curious if there's some explanation for that.
Not that I have. I don't know if or Paul know about that one. We can certainly follow up and get back to you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It just jumped out at me so I was curious if someone could explain. I'd be happy to take it over email.
Well, maybe Ross could send a note to us that we could share with the commission.
Thanks.
Where are we at here?
Never, never.
I'm through unless there are other
Okay.
questions on that.
Right.
On the
Other
financial
questions
review
on the
on March.
financial review.
Just, where do you think, so you know, we're gonna talk later about the budget, and I was reviewing that stuff and watching the presentation from last week and just thinking about this year's capital budget, and next year there's some big increases for things like relicensing and all the expenses that you itemized. Where do you, I guess, so maybe if you wanna talk about this later, I would understand when we get to that part of the budget, but where do you think we're gonna land on capital spending this year? And do you think that will, you know, how did that factor in with capital budgeting for next year?
So I can tell you that currently the capital forecast has us landing at, just make sure I'm getting the right column here. The forecast is not that much off from budget. We had a total capital budget of 11.7 million. The forecast currently, and we just updated it last month, is coming in at 11.2, so about
Great.
$500,000 off. I think that's a little high. I think it will actually come in a little lower than that.
Yep.
In terms of how that played into the FY26 budget, I would say it didn't really. Yeah,
Understood.
except to the extent that, and there were a few items, but not many things that were, you know, we said, oh, we're not going to get to it this year, so let's put them in next year's budget. Most of the things that fall into that category were sort of cut from FY25 and deferred to FY26 as opposed to in the 25 budget, and then we decided midstream not to do them at all.
Got it. Yeah, knowing that your forecast was gonna end close to the budget, I wouldn't have even asked that as a follow-up. So
Sure.
thank you for explaining that. It's hard to know with looking at, you know, March financials and capital stuff is volatile, as you've all explained, with changes in trade and other things. So thank you for the explanation there. It's helpful.
You're most welcome.
Other questions for financial review? Hearing none, let's move on to the item number 7, the FY 2026 budget, with both Emily and Mr. Springer.
Okay.
So I was going to ask for what the commission's pleasure is here. We're prepared to walk through kind of a slide version of the budget, which is in your packet. We could also, you know, instead, we could go through the more detailed, like, budget binder, which is also in your packet. We could start high level and go deep if you feel the need to. Does that sound like a plan? It's just, I'm gonna give you as much kind of detail as you want. Just letting you know that I've got both kind of queued up
Right.
here.
I think the high level is good.
We can
Okay, great.
start there, and if we need to drill down, then we will.
Absolutely. Okay. So this year for the board, this is the same presentation we gave to the Board of Finance last Monday?
Wednesday.
No, last Wednesday, a week ago. And this year, the mayor's office, clerk treasurer's office asked us to use a standard format. So you'll see these slides are a little bit different than what we usually give you. They asked us to start with an org chart, which I think you're familiar with, so we're going to move on and start with kind of some highlights around net zero energy.
Great. So as you can see here, we're going to be continuing, despite some headwinds, significant at the federal level, some at the state level now as well, to advance our electrification net zero energy goals. This budget includes funding for electrification rebates, again, above and beyond what's absolutely mandated at the state level, because we know that it has a good return from a business standpoint and also obviously from a climate standpoint. So as you can see, about $3.6 million between the efficiency program and the Tier 3 electrification rebates to support customers. knowing full well that there may well be rollbacks coming from the federal level on a variety of rebates, knowing the state programs under the Inflation Reduction Act have not yet rolled out in large part, and knowing as well that the state just made an announcement, the governor did yesterday, about pausing implementation of the Clean Cars and Trucks program, which helps to mandate a certain amount of EV inventory using the California EPA waiver as the mechanism. So, as I mentioned, some headwinds, both state and federal level, but we're going to continue to invest. All the different programs that you're familiar with, I won't run through them all, but we also have matching funds continuing for the Building Giants program, which is the federal grant we have continued to have access to, which is going to support the new heat pump bill credit program for residential and the new peak demand reduction program with commercial customers that you've reviewed and approved already. We also are going to have a second all-electric bucket truck with state funds and matching funds that we'll provide. We're in the process of beginning to work on procurement for that. It takes a period of time because you have to custom order these things. And the clean truck rule at least might have helped us in that regard with heavy-duty electrification, with manufacturers being required to provide inventory for those types of vehicles in Vermont. As it stands now, we usually have to go out of state and do a custom run for that type of truck. We are, as you know, paused on our EV charging. We talked about earlier our grant at the federal level. This budget has funding for 4 level 3s and 10 level 2 public chargers. The 4 level 3s will probably be in a bank at one location, both because that's cost efficient from an infrastructure standpoint, but also we want to give drivers confidence when they look on the map and they say, okay, I'm going to pull over and find a spot in Burlington to come charge, that there's not one charger and it happens to be in service with somebody else or broken or whatever it might be. We know having a bank will be more attractive to EV drivers, to have them come stop in Burlington and maybe shop, dine with us, spend some money in the local economy. We will have our first all-electric forklift as part of this budget. We'll continue the efforts here to switch our fleet over to electric in a variety of different ways. Capital, we'll get to the capital budget, going to your question, Commissioner Voda. The capital budget for FY26 is significant. And we'll talk about why and what goes into that. But among those investments are relicensing at Winooski 1, which is largely fees for consulting and other services, very extensive process to relicense the hydro facility. The McNeil wood chip dryer, we have the first tranche of potential implementation funding for that. It's probably a 2-year project, all told, but we have funding through the revenue bond for that. A variety of different IT system projects that you've heard about in other presentations continue to advance in this budget. We have a limited amount for Velco equity. Most of the Velco equity that we're going to be investing in is going to be through VEPSA at this point, where they'll use the equity and they'll finance it for us, and we'll get the equity over time, so it's not as big a cash draw for our customers, as well as the distribution system upgrades. There's issuance costs in here for the revenue bond. We're actively exploring working with the Vermont Municipal Bond Bank this time around. They have a higher credit rating than we do, and could potentially get us a better interest rate if we're part of their financing. And we're looking currently at, there's either a July or February option. Emily's exploring actively with our debt consultant which of those two options we might undertake, but that's our current thinking. And then we'll have those pilot rates for those 2 Building Giants programs that I mentioned, the residential and the commercial. So hopefully for heat pump customers on the residential side, in the not distant future, you'll be able to sign up, have devices installed to help monitor your use, and then get a $5 bill credit each month for participating in the pilot and helping us reduce peak demand.
So I have a couple questions, and mostly about the federal piece. So always the incentives are locally funded, right?
Our incentives, yes.
Yeah. And we know that that's what everybody wants because they keep passing the bond and we talk, and net zero energy, blah, blah, blah.
Right.
All right, so if Energy Star goes away,
Yes.
how does that impact incentives?
So it won't impact the electrification rebates particularly, because those don't require an Energy Star rated
You've
EV
just
or
already
anything like that.
identified models and
yeah.
technologies.
I mean, Energy Star is very useful in the electrification space to get a more efficient induction stove or heat pump dryer or different technologies. But in the electrification space, it wouldn't affect us as much. The efficiency program space will have a big impact. I know that we through Efficiency Vermont use the Energy Star list, and in some cases the above Energy Star list, for determining what rebates we give for, appliances and different types of technologies. So Beyond the consumer impact there, I would imagine if Energy Star truly does disappear and there's not a replacement in the marketplace, Lara maybe could speak to this better than I could, I would imagine that our local efficiency programs are going to have to come up with other metrics or ways in which to tell consumers which appliances are going to be available for rebates, and if so, how, because that's been a really useful way to do it so far. But yeah.
I'm happy to support BED and the commission in any kind of risk impact assessment we want to do, or thought process of how to consider impact on those types of goals, or even just consumer confusion or market disruption or anything
Right.
like that. So let me know if you.
I've been thinking maybe we need like a Vermont Energy Star program, and we just rate the appliances ourselves for a period of time. I don't know.
We use California's or
or use
whatever, like somebody else
California.
will do it, right?
Yeah.
Massachusetts.
I think we
We've
had governments band together like that who are like-minded. We could get somewhere maybe.
We have, there's NEEP, the New England kind of RIO, Regional Efficiency Organization. They have supported the heat pump efforts. We've had ones in the past like Pearl or Clasp, or the Northwest has created cold climate specs for heat pumps as well. The challenge is a lot of it, it's either an investment in setting up a certification, demonstration, testing, and then labeling, if you want it about consumer choice and consumer awareness. But it doesn't mean it can't be done.
Yeah.
And CEE, which is the national organization, is starting to dig in, and not starting to, they've been digging in to try and understand potential impact and what can come forward as potential backfill certification programs.
As you all know, we're small compared to Efficiency Vermont, so we'll likely be
Follow them.
riding along with them on this journey to figure this out. Happy to participate however we can. And it's really unfortunate that the federal government's doing this.
Yeah, because the Energy Star, the branding,
Yeah.
whatever, is well accepted.
Yeah.
And also the California standards for vehicles is being challenged too, right?
Yeah, so there's two ways it's being challenged. So the Congress is trying to use the Congressional Review Act in a way that the Senate parliamentarian at least has said is not appropriate, because the Government Accountability Office has said it's not appropriate. And it sounds like in the Senate that the majority party may override the parliamentarian in a very atypical move and take up a House bill that negated California's waiver for these purposes. If that happens, it's a very big issue, I think, procedurally in the Senate, but for us, in terms of climate policy, it could be really negative. And then beyond that, the governor paused our implementation, as a few states have done, but not only for the trucks program, which I think was maybe more anticipated among some of the environmental community here, but also the cars program. And so for reference, I think they were saying something in the neighborhood of 12+% of the sales last year in Vermont were EVs or plug-in hybrids. The program that would take place for 2026 would mandate that the manufacturers supply inventory that would be equivalent to 35% of the vehicles being zero emissions, whether they're electric or other types of fuel sources. My understanding, there's a lot of regulatory flexibility in there, but it's really about mandating the supply from the manufacturers. The local auto dealer organization seems to be opposed to this and are concerned that inventory will just fly to New Hampshire or elsewhere where people may go buy fossil fuel vehicles. But all told, if we're never going to take this step, we may suffer from a lack of inventory in Vermont, which makes our rebates all the more hard to use. So although we're still looking to understand a little more about what's going on with this at the state level, my initial take is that it's a significant headwind and something that's unwelcome from an EV adoption standpoint.
I have a quick question on the pilot rate. Can you help me understand how that's facilitated and what that means?
Yeah, so on the residential side, at least, what we're looking at would be an 18-month pilot program. And through the federal grant and matching funds, if you have a mini split heat pump, for example, we'd come in and say, here's a device that will help you automate your heat pump's controls. You'll be able to access it from your phone for convenience as opposed to using the handheld remote. And it'll help us be able to send a signal to the heat pump to moderate usage during peak periods several times a month. And in exchange for doing that, and then also having a device on your electric panel that helps us confirm that the reduction actually took place, we'd provide a $5 a month bill credit during that participation time to compensate you, but also really to help start to reduce your cost of running the heat pump. And the goal would be to develop longer term an end-use rate like we have with EVs, where we say, okay, we know the technology works. We're going to hopefully test it with 1,000 heat pumps in Burlington. Now we're going to offer a educated EV rate structure based on that pilot experience, where we can say, okay, if you'll allow us to mitigate your use by a few degrees here and there during peak, then, and that'd be summer and winter potentially, then we will provide you a discounted rate for your heat pump usage. And that's the ultimate goal, because we want it to be cheaper to run a heat pump than to heat with fossil fuel. And sometimes that's the case. It's not always the case, particularly with cheap natural gas. So this is a step towards making that more of a reality. All right. So additionally, we have a number of really important investments in equity and accessibility. Ita's here with us for commission. Appreciate it. We're doing a number of different things, one of which is we're doing tonight, bringing you a proposal for expanding the energy assistance program to cover residential shelters that are serving the unhoused, as well as affordable housing units that in some cases we haven't been able to ensure that the savings are being passed on, so they hadn't been eligible previously, but we have some language to support that. We're working with our colleagues at Water Resources on a program to help with their customers who are, in most cases, I think we're looking at renters who may not have an individual meter for water, but we have them on an individual meter. And so water can pass through economic assistance through our billing structure to those customers. So electric bill would be lower. Their water bill obviously wouldn't be impacted, but there's a lot of benefits for that, and it's a good cross-departmental collaboration, which we're working on actively. There's been some great videos. The newest one's weatherization, which I just saw. Ita has a star turn in there, I think, as well. And these are being translated into a number of different languages so that people in the community can understand their electric bill, understand what weatherization means. These are really great educational videos that we can use for outreach. As noted here, we have a number of different community events and partnerships. Ita's been out in the community in a variety of places, all noted here, and reaching customers in a way that I don't think we've been able to do before. We just had a really great lunch and learn today right in this space, learning about a partnership we had between our team working on equity and the city's GIS team, and showed us some really interesting overlapping maps and illustrations of where our rebates are going, and different income levels, sensitivities, different geographic sensitivities around the city. So there's a lot of great partnerships happening to kind of understand our impact with customers. And, as mentioned here, a number of different language access, efforts as well. So we were at Earth Day. We will be at Juneteenth again with the induction cooking demo and F-150, a number of different events, Pride, Community Garden Work Day, Harvest Run. We'll be at the Lake Monsters and other events over the summer as well. So I think that's everything on the slide here, but glad to answer questions or.
I should probably know this, but is there a community, like a publicly accessible calendar of these events?
I guess for us, there's really not. We kind of advertise them as we go, but that's an idea.
Okay.
Is
So I
that
was thinking
maybe we have enough going on?
I'm going
that-
to load some of these into my calendar. I didn't know if there was like a way to do it proactively.
Maybe something we share with Adam for the website.
Yeah, it's a great idea.
Okay, thanks.
I don't think we used to have enough stuff to populate a calendar.
Fair.
And we do have our own
We're doing a
calendar
lot.
too, so
Doing
we
a lot of great
could
things,
do that.
yeah.
Thank you.
Yep.
I think I turn it over to Emily now for a few slides.
Okay, so this is a slide that we typically include in our budget presentation. It shows what we call controllable expenses and how they have grown over the past 10 years. The actual or budgeted controllable expenses are the blue line here, and the red line shows the projection for what those expenses would otherwise be if they had continued to grow at the trend they were on prior to FY16. So between 07 and 16, on average, these expenses grew 5.84%. Since FY16, we've been able to keep them on average to 4.2% a year. This year, we cut $810,000 of non-power supply operating and maintenance expenses from the budget. Included in that is an assumed $300,000 in vacancy savings. So this is to give you an idea. This is all O&M that's not power supply, so taking out transmission. It's taking out Tier 3 compliance, which is not controllable, and it's removing EEU expenditures as well. So it's kind of everything else.
Maybe it's worth mentioning here too that I think that the way the city frames the budget a lot of times is what the gap was at the beginning versus where you landed. And I think for us, we've had gaps, in my experience, between like 1 and 10 million when we start a budgeting process to get us to where we need to be in terms of our Moody's ratings, our net income, et cetera. We were around 4.5 million roughly.
When we started.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the last time we spoke to you, we were at about $2 million.
Right. So all told, from the budget we would have started with, we've
Mm-hmm.
already removed 4.5 million of expense.
Yep. Right, next I'll go through
Can I
the
ask a
operating
really
revenues.
quick
Oh, sorry,
question?
yeah.
No, it's okay. The 300K in vacancy assumption, is that flat? Is that a city assumption? Is that growing?
It's actually not flat, slightly
It's
less.
than last year,
Okay.
a little bit.
Yeah. I think we had a different set of positions that were vacant going into last year's budget than this year's. So our team, although I would have loved to assume a higher number, and we may well yield a higher number in the operation of the budget, I think we were trying to be a little bit conservative in our assumptions there based on what positions were available to us to hold vacant for a period of time this year.
Thanks.
Okay, so then, looking at operating revenues, as we discussed, I think, at the April meeting, sales to customers, if we had done nothing at all, would only have grown by 1.5%, according to our forecast of how many kilowatt hours additionally would be sold. So you can see we've now added the assumption of the 4.5% rate increase starting September 1st. So that yields a total of a 5.1% variance in sales to customers. Rec revenues are another highlight. Rec prices right now are very strong, almost at the maximum level they can reach. So that's a 23% variance to budget from last year. It's adding just under $2 million in revenues from recs. Miscellaneous revenues other is mostly EEU revenues, which are offset by EEU expense under O&M. So overall operating revenues, a variance of 7.5%.
So that 1.5, the underlying growth in kilowatt hours, is that a result of increased electrification, more just kind of back to pre-COVID patterns of people being in offices and things being turned on? And then also, we have such a housing, like, we're building all this stuff. Like, when is that gonna come online, and are we gonna see that?
It's everything, right? It's
Yeah.
all of the above that you just mentioned.
Yep.
And, you know, we've been seeing higher sales versus budget for most of this fiscal year, which has been a real boon, which, you know, we're asking ourselves those questions, right? Because the weather has been a little bit different than budget, but not crazily
colder.
so. Yeah, but, I mean, weather can make a huge, huge difference in sales. So it's kind of hard to separate that signal out from the weather noise, right? But we're certainly asking ourselves, you know, are we finally starting to see an impact from electrification? It is built into the forecast, but it's not a significant variable kind of in the load forecast that the consultants use. So yes, the housing is helping, but remember, we're like 70% commercial. So the new residences are good, but of our total revenues, the residential is the smaller share. Yeah.
Do you know when those developments off of, like, the pit that's getting filled in, when that's gonna get turned on? No.
That's the other thing. The forecast, the timing of those things, I mean, you can only, you know what's reported in the newspaper, or you know what, Energy Services is having conversations with those developers, and, they share their planned timelines.
Right. Then
But we've seen how those, life changes, right? And so we generally don't budget to say, oh, City Place just announced they're gonna have occupancy. I mean, if we had done that,
Right, you would've-
5 years ago, right, we would have had them online, 4 years ago, so.
But I think they've publicly indicated that they're hoping to have that over the next year, the first phase open. And so if that does happen, it's an opportunity for a positive variance in the
Correct.
budget,
Right.
because
Right.
we're budgeting more conservatively on it.
I have a question. You talked about commercial being such a large percentage. I'm curious, you might not have this answer, but historically, the trend, with what's going on a federal level, tariffs, trade, et cetera, potential doomsday scenarios, historically, how has that changed in the commercial sector in other financially challenging years?
You can
economic?
see it.
You can see it?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, if a graph of sales to customers' revenue over the past 20 years, you can look at them and say, there was the 2008 recession.
Right.
There was the 2002 recession.
Right.
It does show up.
Any discussion, or it's too early?
Yeah.
Got it.
I think if you think about it, like our two large institutions or several large institutions within the city, if you include the city itself, and plus, the university, the college, the medical center, are gonna, everyone would be impacted potentially by tariffs or other issues, but not to the extent that like a manufacturer would
Sure.
potentially. And so it's a mixed bag, because we've lost some manufacturing in Burlington over the last several years. We've talked about like Blodgett or Coffee Cup, but at the same time, we're less susceptible, I think, to kind of manufacturing-related economic challenges. There's obviously challenges in terms of Canadian tourism and other things that could impact some of our businesses, but I guess I'm less concerned than I would be if we hosted a large manufacturing commercial base, and that would be potentially more at risk.
Okay, then I'll move on to the operating expenses. So just sort of comparing, we'll go back. So we have total operating revenues, 72.7 million. Total operating expenses, 74.2 million. Fuel is up 13%. This is due to a higher assumed capacity factor for McNeil in FY26 as compared to FY25. Also a slight, pretty modest increase in the fuel price, the price per ton of wood chips, in order to make sure we bring in sufficient wood to support that higher level of production. Purchase power expense also up versus budget, 8.5%. Transmission, we discussed this last time, I think. That's up by almost or over 2 million, a 14% increase. Other O&M up just under 8%. Small increase in depreciation, small increase in taxes and the payment in lieu of taxes.
Just worth noting briefly,
Oh, all right.
McNeil capacity factor is going to be more at a historical normal level in '26. We're not seeking to operate it above historical norms, but it had dipped below historical norms for '25. So it's going to be back around a 60% capacity factor, which is not the highest certainly we've seen. I mean, it's been at 70% in the past, but not the lowest, which would be more on the 50% side.
Mm-hmm. So then non-operating items, very small increase in dividends from our investment in Velco and Transco. Interest rates have fallen over the course of FY24 and 25, so those are projected to be a little lower in FY26. Grants and capital contributions also down by 15 or almost 16%. That said, FY25 was a abnormally high grant income budgeted year. Large percentage variance, but small dollar change in other income. And then interest expense also dropping slightly. We had one of our 2014 bonds will mature this July 1st.
And that's how you balance the budget with other income, right? Because your
Yes.
revenues are below the
Yes.
expenses.
Yes.
Okay.
I'm actually going to go a little out of order here.
Okay.
But this, it flows exactly to your question. So we had a net operating loss budgeted this year of $1.5 million. It's not as, we were in a better position FY25 with a $644,000 budgeted net loss. Budgeted net income for FY26, $2.2 million. And we're budgeting ending cash balance on June 30, 2026 of $13.2 million. And down below here, you can see the capital budget. Total, as Darren mentioned, is significantly higher than FY25 at $15.2 million. Financing for that $3 million will come from the general obligation bond, and the remainder from the revenue bond. And then the Moody's metrics resulting from this budget, 135 days cash on hand, including the line of credit, a debt service coverage ratio of 4.77, and an adjusted debt service coverage ratio of 1.15.
And just on the capital, it's a high number that we're budgeting, and historically, you would look and say there's no way you're going to be able to spend that, which may well end up being true. That said, there are a number of projects here that are, as I mentioned, like the FERC-Winooski 1 relicensing is primarily consultants, and it's an atypical project that we wouldn't normally fund in a given year, but it's on a timeline where we have to get it done. There's a coinciding, a number of different IT projects that are happening, a number of distribution projects, generation projects, and rather than try to project now which ones may move quicker than others, because of the revenue bond, the flexibility that provides us, we've included everything that we think could conceivably happen here for 26, and that we would hope to have happen, but knowing that this, given that we typically underspend capital, we may well come in below that number. Projects may move from 26 into 27, but we didn't want to undersell it this year and then end up needing to spend more than what we had budgeted. So I would join you in being surprised if we spend $15 million in capital in 26, but that's sort of what everything adds up to when you stack the projects together that need to move forward in the near future.
And then I will go back and maybe
Right.
close here, Darren, with
Yeah, so
opportunities.
this was like a new kind of format, I think, for the city this year, this threats and opportunities. So on the threat side, a couple of these we've talked about. Transmission is continuing to be unacceptably high. We've encouraged Velco and our regulators at the state level who are enthusiastic about taking on this fight to bring as much increased scrutiny to these expenses in other states as we possibly can to reduce the upward pressure on Vermont ratepayers. They're very sympathetic and supportive of that. I think Vermont's potentially going to play a leadership role through the Department of Public Service and Velco, hopefully in taking on these issues. We've talked about the federal EV charging grant being frozen. We've talked a little about tariffs and price increases. We're starting to see some of that on some equipment, and it seems like it changes every other day. So we'll see how much that durably impacts us, but we've seen some impacts. The renewable energy standard, which we supported, the update in 2024, does put some additional obligations on us, particularly related to new load. So as we see that 1.5% of new load come online, we're going to serve a portion of that with what we think of as new renewables, which is really post-2010 renewables, which functionally might mean that a REC from a wind project that we have that was built, let's say, in 2013 that we might have sold previously and arbitraged with a lesser value REC, we may now use that REC to retire in Vermont against this obligation. So there's some increased cost pressure related to that. To be clear, we support it, but that's the reality. The lack of renewables, and this is a point that I just want to hammer on for a moment, if I can, because I hear a lot in some of our kind of public discussions in Burlington that we could just go buy hydro or we could just go buy wind or whatever. You really can't. That would be great if there was this abundance of hydro and wind on the market, but we have an expiring contract as of the end of this year, the First Light contract, which you all approved for hydro, that replaced another expiring contract from Great River. And without getting into the details of market issues in public session, I will say I'm underwhelmed by the supply options so far that we're able to garner from RFPs and other efforts. So there is a dearth of available renewables, not an abundance, on the New England market right now. And we're seeing that in a variety of contexts. And it's just important to know because forget about, some of the conversations that we're having in a broader context about like which renewables we want or don't want. We can't even keep the ones we have to, continue being the 100% renewable utility that we want to continue to be as easily as we used to. So it's just an important piece to keep in mind. We'll work as hard as we can to bring a good option forward to the commission to replace that expiring contract at the end of the year. Continued COLA and health benefit increases, obviously some upward pressure there. On the opportunity side, we've talked about the Building Giants program a few times, the heat pump rate opportunity. Our software systems are going to give us some new capabilities that we're excited about. We're working to have, I think in the not hopefully distant future, an outage management system that's going to be able to tell customers before they would think to tell us that we know there's an outage via a text or some sort of automated message, and here's what we know, and get information out in a whole new way. So we're excited about that kind of automation that we can bring. Customer information system combined with our new meter data management system unlocks all kinds of rate possibilities, dynamic and otherwise, to help us with peak reduction and help us with end-use rates and other things. The DERMS is another system that really could help manage distributed energy resources in a new way for us. So lots of capabilities will potentially unlock as we update these systems. We are seeing upward motion now in sales, and strategic electrification is definitely a part of that. And we want to see that trend accelerate, continue, break out of the noise and be part of a more permanent trend. I mentioned earlier that we're looking at the July or February opportunity for the revenue bond. I think we have maybe the luxury, hopefully, of waiting to see if interest rates come down a little bit. So we're looking into that, exploring that. EU regulatory reform. So we next year have to have an extension of the current pilot that's been underway that enables us to spend a portion of our efficiency money in a more innovative way on emission reduction projects. If that expires, and I'll be clear that it hasn't been supported fully by the current administration, and if it expires, we lose out in Burlington on a lot of important climate investments. So we've made the case a little bit, but we're going to make the case more clearly next legislative session in all likelihood about the need to extend this program. And really, we need to think bigger about the efficiency program. It's aimed at electric efficiency, which was a huge challenge going back to the 70s and 80s when we had resistance heat and we were 5% of the ISO load instead of 4%, and our costs were increasing, and we had all sorts of issues around our power supply. It's arguably less of an issue now than fossil fuels in the thermal and transportation sector, although still important. And I'd like to see us evolve from electric efficiency only to electric efficiency and all these other topics as well being eligible within the efficiency space. We've sort of moved in that direction with these pilots, but in a tentative way and in a way that could be rolled back and be good for us to be able to have that be more durable. And then lastly, innovation and efficiency at McNeil. As I mentioned, we got the signed contract tonight with our vendor for the efficiency and emission reduction study, so we're excited about that. The wood chip dryer has a lot of potential, and we're excited about that as well, and the opportunities to really continue to bring forward innovation at McNeil and investment that helps us reach some common ground in the city around, okay, we may need this asset for longer than some people may appreciate, and at the same time, we want to appreciate the opportunity to achieve some stack emission reductions, achieve some environmental footprint improvement that hopefully everybody can get behind. And so we'll continue to bring forward ideas around that and be as creative as we can. So I think that's the budget slides.
So I have a couple questions. One, how, for McNeil, what about the partnership? Changes in the partnership, is that an opportunity?
It is.
Yeah.
It is.
You're not putting that on the list just because?
Well, still in process, right?
Okay.
But certainly, as we've stated, if you had full ownership after a period of transition in all likelihood, which could last, several years, but at the end of that period, you could change the operating parameters of the plant to achieve some stack emission reduction combined with the efficiency efforts that get towards a pretty substantial achievement, and at the same time still provide the energy we need for Burlington, the reliability we have. Right. There will absolutely be a cost to that. We're working hard to quantify that so that when we do hopefully have something to bring forward in that space, we can be transparent with the commission, the council, the Board of Finance, and the public about if we want to achieve these changes over time, this is the additional rate pressure it'll bring. And we think it's worth it because we want to achieve these reductions while still having the value of the facility, but we want people to see that and be able to understand it, because it will in all likelihood show up in some ways in future rate needs, and we want to be transparent about that.
Okay. And then I noticed in one of the budget slides, there was like a pension catch-up of about $1 million. Is that because of the market volatility?
No, that's in reference to, every year there's sort of a true-up of pension
Okay, so it's just
expense and
normal
pension liability,
cost.
and it's based on the actuary's report of sort of the state of the pension fund as of the prior year. And you have to sort of make some balance sheet adjustments, and the offset to those is pension expense. So it's very hard to predict. We've had, expense hits, they're non-cash, but we have to book an expense of, $1 million or $2 million, and then some years we've booked a six-figure credit the other way. So in the budget, we take a 3-year average of the last 3 such adjustments, and,
So it's just a
so we have something in
normal
there, yeah.
part of the
Mhm.
adjustments.
Yes.
And then what about the city financial challenges? Is that just not part of, BED operates totally separate from that, and then there's no, because there was just that 7 Days article, right? That was pretty dire.
Yep.
And I was curious, are some things gonna come over here, or?
Yeah, I think on the city side, the general fund is the focus, and property taxes are the focus, and what you've read in 7 Days or the announcements you've seen relative to the city budget are really strictly related to the city budget and not the enterprise fund budget at BED. But that being said, we're also very conscious of the financial pressures on the city. We're conscious of the affordability challenge for Burlington residents generally. We've done everything we think we can responsibly do to cut from the budget and keep the rate need lower than last year. Not as low as I know we would like it, or the commission, or probably folks more generally, but lower than last year certainly, and on a trend hopefully to be lower in the future as much as we can. We are not adding any positions in this budget. We are flat from a labor standpoint. And so we're trying to be conscious of all of those challenges and doing our part to be lowering costs as much as we can, and then partnering with other city departments like water where we can help achieve some of their affordability and equity needs. So really, we're trying to be a partner in that effort. But strictly speaking, all those issues are related to the general fund and property taxes, not electric rates. We do have rate slides as well. So if the commission would like to move on the budget first, and then we can do the rates. And
Yeah, I think that, since we have that separated out into 2 different, and I believe there's language for each, so. But before we do that, are there any more questions regarding the budget itself? Is the commission prepared to make a motion about that?
I think so.
So what I would entertain that.
We do. I move to approve the department's fiscal year 2026 capital and operating budget as presented.
I have a motion, do I have a second?
Second.
Motioned and seconded, and on this I will invite discussion on the motion, if any. Okay, hearing none, all those in favor of the motion indicate by saying aye.
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 All those opposed say nay. The ayes have it, budget passes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We'll move on to item number 8, which is the FY 2026 rate case.
So here we have, I think yes, they are the same slides that we presented to the commission in April.
Mhm.
Happy to walk through those again, or defer on that
Maybe
and
just
have a discussion.
maybe just a high level, just for the
Mhm.
for folks that might be viewing this
Sure.
now or in the near
Yep.
future.
So as discussed in April, we are requesting a rate increase up to 4.5% to support the FY26 budget. I can get my slides to go. This slide shows BED rate changes since 1980. You can see we've had some pretty high ones in past years. We had a 12-year stretch here with no rate increases. And then over the past 4 years, we've had in the single digits and trying to move them into the lower single digits, including this with this most recent proposed one of 4.5% in 2025. This shows the past 5 years of requested rate changes as compared to the rate increase we believe we could have justified based on our cost of service. And every year, what we've requested has been less than what we believe we could have justified. We are actively still working on determining what we believe our cost of service will be for FY26. So I'm not able to share that yet. If it turns out that it's, for whatever reason, less than 4.5, then obviously that's not what we'll file for. But we don't expect that to be the case right now.
Is this tracking towards, there was a goal, I know we've mentioned this over the past couple of years. General Manager Springer's mentioned his goal of getting it down to that, whatever that level
3%.
was, where 2.5%, whatever it was, where you
3,
don't have to go to the PUC.
Yeah,
and
it's
we
at
can just
3.
sort of, and do you feel like this is, are we sort of trending towards it? It would be nice to see that goal out. Probably looks like it's still a couple, maybe 3-4 years out, but.
I think it really depends on a couple factors. One is we don't know the COLA for not FY26, but FY27, because that's subject to negotiation. Our union contract expires after the current fiscal year that we're proposing here would play out. So we'll need to get a sense of that. We would need to get a sense of the transmission cost increases. And if those can moderate to some extent, I mean, and you know, you look at those, I think a few years back, we were paying around $7 to $8 million a year for the transmission costs, and now we're paying 11.5. So within our budget, to absorb that level of increase, frankly, and not have double-digit rate cases has been a challenge. But
Sure.
Those two drivers are going to be key. Obviously, what happens in the energy and rec markets can matter, and there could be other kind of, you know, issues. But if we could see a moderation in transmission cost increases, sort of like the property taxes, like we know they've had years where they've been double digits and people say, hey, that's not sustainable, statewide conversation. Transmission's sort of like that for us. And so just to get it in a year where they didn't just jump, even if they stayed level or even went up a little bit, would be a huge relief to our need for rate change. So that factor, unfortunately, is not fully within our control. Definitely remains a goal to try to get to that 3% level, automated, more of an automated process, and I think more in line with inflation expectations for Burlington residents. So we started this year with that goal, and we just couldn't get all the way there, but we'll continue to strive for it next year.
The other factor I would just add quickly is sales. So if your revenues grow, you have
Yeah.
room to support increases in your expenses. If your revenues are not growing, then you have to raise rates in order to support the increases in expenses.
Yeah, that's a
Which is
good
where
point.
City Place comes into play, the new school,
Exactly.
Like
All
high
of those
school.
things
the
will.
high school, that's.
Those things will help.
huge.
That's right.
Mhm.
All right.
Question?
Oh, yes.
What is the difference between the cost of service and the budget? So like, I imagine you have a fully baked budget and approved by the commission now, freshly. But what goes into the cost of service calculation that you don't know in the budget?
Yeah, so the cost of service is based on your most recent audited financial statements of a closed fiscal year. So in our case, we're starting from what was the actual cost of service in FY24. From there, you're allowed to make what are called known and measurable changes to your cost of service, both increases in expense and decreases in expense. So for example, we switched SCADA systems. So we need to deduct the cost of the old SCADA support contract and add in the cost of the new SCADA support contract. So you're making both additions and sort of deductions from your cost of service. But the key thing is they have to be known and they have to be measurable. So, for example, James and I were just discussing, we were reviewing the budget versus the cost of service and looking at where are there differences and do we have a good reason why? Do we understand why they're diverging? In the budget, we have assumed a Hydro-Quebec rate increase starting in January. We can't put that increase into the cost of service because we haven't received official notice from Hydro-Quebec that rates will increase. We want to budget conservatively and have the budget money available because we expect that will happen, but it doesn't meet the test for inclusion. So you have to be basing it on signed contracts, invoices received, that type of thing. And then for power supply, you have to make certain assumptions, but you're using things like historical production levels and most recent energy forwards. And power supply is a bit different because one can't sort of document everything with certainty, but there are certain guidelines around the assumptions one can make. So it's not exactly the same as the cost of service. Another good example in this budget is that we've included in this year's budget funds to do testing at the gas turbine of running it on renewable R99 fuel. So we'll need to bring in a temporary fuel tank, buy some R99, that'll have some expense. There's like $175,000 or something worth of O&M expense. It's not a capital project because you're not building anything permanent. We can't put that in the cost of service because it's just an estimate. We've estimated what we think it will cost, but we haven't committed or signed anything that really obligates us to do that.
Great, thank you for that.
And on the other side of that,
James?
on the other side of that equation, I'll just note, for example, too, that you're not allowed to forecast increases in sales. So you take the sales from the historical period. And the reason they're doing all of this is to prevent there from being too much ability to have the rate case be any number you want it to be. If you could forecast, increases and decreases in sales, and you could forecast everything, the fear from the regulatory side is that the answer isn't really meaningful. It did work better when loads were going up than when they were going down, because anything you couldn't include was probably covered by increasing sales. That's only been the case probably as of this rate increase that we've actually seen a forecasted increase in sales that we're not able to put in the rate case. So, but again, you're constrained on both sides too.
Discuss this one?
Yeah, and in fact, is the next
Is the
slide the
next
one
one?
from Board of Finance? It is, okay.
Yeah.
Actually, would turn to this one. So I think this is just important, again, context. This is what's going on in Rhode Island, Massachusetts, some of the other states, is they are seeing significant upward pressure on natural gas rates and electric rates. In some cases, doubling of bills, things like that are untenable because they are exposed to the grid. Your point earlier being, how do you deal with being exposed? We have long-term contracts or resources that we own and operate, and that insulates us to some extent from, some of these price spikes and volatility that you see when your portfolio is more exposed to the grid. Pricing that can happen, the commodity gas pricing that really drives that. And so, this is just important context for Massachusetts. They're using, I think, a significant portion of a clean energy fund to put $50 credits into bills this past April, just to give some relief to consumers. And there's been, ratepayer protests. There's like letters coming in, in quantities of over 1,000 from people who are upset about rates. And none of this is to say that we're doing great just because we're at 4.5%. We'd like to be lower. But I just think it's important for folks to understand both anybody who might have a critique on the power supply side about how we manage the power supply, but also anybody who'd be advocating for us to be purchasing grid power or exposed more to grid power. This is what can happen when you're exposed to the market in a more meaningful way. And these are just some snippets of articles with links, but there's a lot of of news coverage out there, and I don't think it's limited to these two states. You can see examples of this in New Hampshire, going back to a couple years ago. You can see it in Connecticut. Vermont's uniquely positioned to insulate ourselves from some of this volatility. That's our model, and I think it works reasonably well. It's not to say that anybody should be satisfied with any sort of cost increase, but context is important.
This is not necessarily the most apples to apples moment to mention this, but I've been hesitating to mention a few times since my annual plug, but it seems to kind of feel like it has a couple of connections. You're talking about supply side, totally respect that. And if right now the majority of ducted heat pumps are hybrid units.
Mm-hmm.
I know I say this every year, but our hybrid units, I still worry at the connection to natural gas, both from our goals standpoint as well as if the price volatility on that side spikes things and customers just see, an added bill. I mean,
Right.
I get they're different, but I still feel very strongly we should continue. And even seeing it in the report where we're just reporting on ducted heat
Right.
pumps, not hybrid units and electrically, full heat pump units.
Right.
I might just make my annual plug to kind of and keep either accounting for them separately so we can drive them differently, or
Right.
understand the risk exposure because because once we put those in, it's 10 years, right?
Right.
Or longer.
Yeah.
And I just don't want us, I love our trajectory. I love what's happening in all the direction, and that just feels like that undercurrent one that might come back later on us.
Yeah, no, it's a good point. We do incentivize them differently.
That's
We do
right,
characterize
yes.
them differently and incentivize them differently because we know they don't
That's
provide
helpful
the
reminder.
heating level reduction that a ductless mini split will provide. And I'm still hopeful that the air-to-water technologies will come along enough that we can have the unit where, for those of us who have a boiler as a primary system with, kind of a water kind of baseboard type system, the air-to-water theoretically holds the promise that you could reduce, 80 or more % of your use of the boiler for that purpose by having the connected heat pump in a way that would be similar to the kind of ducted, but in a more efficient manner. So I'm holding out some hope for that as a solution in the not distant future. We also, I know our team on the efficiency side works really hard with the installers to try to get them to lower the set points to more aggressive levels so that the ducted units are going to produce more. But we know that those set points are typically between 30 and 40 degrees. So you're getting shoulder season and a portion of winter, but not the whole winter. So your point is well taken. We don't disagree that they're not a full solution.
And that's all super helpful. And I'm actually even just pushing on the ducted, the differentiation between hybrid ducted
Right.
furnace replacement and pure all heat pump solution.
Right.
Because I had to get 3 different contractors out as a BED resident, but I
Right.
got my non-gas, non-hybrid unit.
Right.
Where were you when I needed you?
Sorry.
But a lot of folks do have the hybrid unit. A lot of
A
folks
lot of
do.
folks have the hybrid
Yeah.
unit, which is
All right, I don't feel bad.
Don't feel bad.
For sure, for sure. I mean,
You're still
3
making a
different
reduction.
contractors. Yeah.
It's important. But no, it's a good point. We're going to see this too
Can I
in the
just-
rooftop unit context as well.
Yes.
Because we're starting to see heat pump
Yes.
RTU hybrids with
Yes.
gas.
Yes.
It's good in a way because it gives us a solution we didn't have, but it'll have
Yes.
some of the same challenge you're
Yes.
referencing to.
Okay, I know it wasn't quite the right moment, but I kept thinking about different times.
If it's annual, now's a good time to bring it up because this is,
Well, the other thing I would just quickly mention on that, Darren, is that, of course, also remember the dynamic of the fact that when we talk about natural gas and electricity, we're talking about natural gas up the Algonquin pipeline. And when we talked about natural gas for heating in Burlington, we're talking about coming out of Canada off of the VGS pipeline. So there's a disconnect in those two markets too that affects us.
okay.
Thank you all.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, so continuing through the rate case presentation, this slide shows the change in the cost of BED electricity over the past 15 years. It's the royal blue line at the bottom, including the proposed 4.5% rate increase, as compared to the costs of some other goods and services. Housing is the blackish line at the top. Core inflation is the kind of azure, lighter blue line in the middle. This compares residential rates of BED, which is again royal blue at the bottom, with the Energy Assistance Program rate in a black offset just below that, as compared to the rest of Vermont, which is the green, and the rest of New England, which is the teal azure blue at top. And you can see residential rates, BED continues to be significantly below both Vermont and the rest of New England.
And Vermont's the lowest in New England now, on every rate basis.
Same comparison with commercial and industrial rates. Here you can see that BED is actually the green line, so our commercial industrial rates are a little bit higher than the rest of Vermont, still well below the rest of New England. And then total cost to serve, all rates, again, Burlington Electric at the bottom, lower than the rest of Vermont and all of New England. This shows the expected effect on customer bills of the rate increase. The monthly bill for the average residential customer based on average residential monthly use is projected to go up $3.78. For a small commercial customer, that increase would be $4.81. And then the effect on the Energy Assistance Program customers, they would have an EAP credit going from $11.86 to $12.40. And then a later agenda item tonight would be a tariff revision that's proposed to expand access to this rate to nonprofit residential shelters and affordable housing providers that document that they'll pass the savings on to their tenants or residents. And I believe that's the last slide on the rate increase.
Thank you. I wasn't expecting to go quite that far down the rabbit hole with that, but that was a good refresher for both us about to make that call, and for folks out there to kind of see that again and understand where we're at. So thank you for that. I appreciate it. Are we? If we're ready to do, I would entertain a motion.
Can I ask a question first?
Sure. Yeah. Absolutely.
Sure. So I appreciate it. You've brought us along on this rate increase. We've spoken about it at a prior meeting, and then I would invite everyone to watch the recording of the Board of Finance meeting where you presented your budget and rate increase, and various counselors asked questions of during the presentation about things. But just to sort of, could one of you again summarize the rationale for the savings and the rate increase? Because it's the key question we've asked before. They asked it there, but I think it's just important that we keep this top of mind. I'm very convinced that you've taken very good efforts to minimize the impact of this, and it could be worse without stronger financial, it could be worse, but for the good management you guys are doing. So could you just speak to that?
Absolutely. I think Council President Travers asked a version of a question at Board of Finance of, how much is a percent relative to rates? And Emily mentioned that it's, roughly $500,000. It might be actually a little bit more by now, but traditionally we've said about $500,000. So to give a sense of how hard it would be to go from a 4.5 to a 3, you'd be cutting over $1.5 million of additional expense when we've already cut the 4.5. And the challenge for us is, because big chunks of our budget are not controllable and not kind of discretionary. I mean, and you deal with this to some extent in the federal and state budget as well. Transmission is not discretionary and not controllable, which is the worst of both worlds, and yet we have to pay it to be connected. So there's some upward cost pressures you have to absorb. We cut everything we can to kind of get to the point we're at. If we had to cut further to try to meet a different and potentially a more arbitrary goal for a specific number, as opposed to landing where we thought was the right balance, I feel like we would start to make cuts that would be more painful and that would be more impactful to our customers and to our long-term kind of vision for net zero energy. And we'd have to start looking at, like, okay, do we cut back on incentives, which is something we've never had to do. We've always kind of, as a core principle, tried to hold incentive investment level or increase it, because we know it's an investment in the business and in the customer and in the climate goals that we have. But you'd have to start to look at that. You'd have to look even more aggressively at, vacancies and other things. And I do worry. We had an effort, back in the middle of the last decade. Chair Moody would have been here when this happened, under General Manager Lunderville, when we did a very big re-scoping of the entire enterprise. And I think at one point in the past, BED had very many more people than we have now. Even though we're growing budget, growing, in terms of our sales now, growing in terms of our complexity of our regulatory structure. So we did a right sizing, and Emily's slide from the beginning of the presentation that showed sort of the 2016 trajectory compared to now is the continued benefit of that right sizing. And we've added strategically a few positions over the years here and there, but we've generally kept the FTE count pretty low compared to some of the historical levels. But I worry you would start to get more aggressive with either vacancy saving assumptions or otherwise, and you would start to lose some key capabilities. And there's areas where we're thin as it is, and we operate a little leaner than I might like, or we lack redundancy in some cases. So those are some of the challenges. I would love to bring forward a lower rate number, as I think hopefully everybody knows, and I think the commission would as well. But those are the trade-offs you get to when you go beyond where we've kind of come to this point. And that's why we try to balance it by saying, okay, where are the core things we want to make sure we're continuing to invest in, core systems needs, core human resource needs, incentive needs, et cetera. What can we control versus not control, and then where do we land from a rate number? And try to balance that out, being respectful that, affordability is a key challenge. So hopefully that's a helpful explanation.
That's great, thank you.
Very
I
good.
have a quick question. I appreciate the characterization on what the priorities you want to maintain and what's driving. And this being a new commissioner and getting familiar with a very complex budget in my eyes. Not that I run a utility every day. So are there any indicators that appear, as we're going forward into the next fiscal year, and even looking beyond into the next couple of years, that tend to indicate this is where it's going to go, or this is where it's going to, here's an opportunity? I'm just curious if that's true.
Yeah, I think we've seen, we started off kind of post-pandemic with the 7.5%. We've never touched that level since, and it was our goal never to go back to that level, because I think even though it was well justified, and actually more than that was justified, we know that's hard for customers to absorb, and we've tried to really stick in the mid to lower single digits, and we've achieved that, albeit 5.5 a couple years. And so when we look out, there's some things you can't control, obviously, as we've talked about. There's some pieces we can control. There's some pieces that could break in our favor, particularly around sales, as Emily just mentioned. So all that said, I think our goal is, and our kind of trajectory is, to be in the low to mid single digits in the foreseeable future. Hopefully more in the, we'd love to be in that 3% range in the foreseeable future as well. We're not seeing like some sort of spike back to 10 or 12 or 15 or 20% like you saw in that chart. And I don't think we're even really seeing a spike to 7.5. I think we're seeing a trajectory that looks more like what it's been the past few years, and that if we can chip away at it a little bit, and there is a compounding effect with rates, so there's a benefit to that over time, then that plays into our best efforts to keep the rates lower. That said, I want to kind of come back to that McNeil point I just made. If we negotiate to have full ownership of McNeil and we want to run it less over time, not immediately, but over time, with the relative same fixed costs and capital needs, that will put rate pressure on Burlington Electric. And we'll have to be very transparent about what that looks like and make sure that's something everybody wants to invest in. Because that'll achieve an environmental aim, but there will be cost pressure associated with that. That cost pressure is probably further out than what we're talking about, but I just want to be fair about that.
Some great follow-up questions.
Yeah.
Thank you. Any other thoughts that might have generated? Thank you. That was really good follow-up. That was awesome. Are we ready to make a, right, then I'll entertain a motion.
I move to recommend to the Board of Finance and the City Council the authorization to pursue a rate case with Vermont Public Utility Commission in the amount of 4.5% on bills rendered beginning September 1st, 2025.
I have a motion. Do I have a second?
Second?
Motioned and seconded, and I'll entertain a discussion on the motion if there's any. Hearing none, all those in favor of the motion indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed indicate by saying nay. The ayes have it, 5-0. The rate case is adopted.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We'll move on to item number 9 on our agenda here, the Energy Assistance Tariff Amendment. That's already been alluded to, but we'll jump right into it.
Maybe I could just mention kind of the impetus
Mm-hmm.
before we jump into the,
And
the,
also, I emailed you all.
I confirm they
Yeah,
have
you got it? Okay, because I do
Yeah.
have these. Okay,
Thank
great.
you.
Just in terms of this item, obviously, we have the Energy Assistance Program. We tripled enrollment this year with the tariff changes that you all approved previously, which we're very pleased with. Etha's done a lot of work on outreach, make sure folks are aware of this. We heard from one of the residential shelters that's sheltering unhoused individuals in the community about their energy bill. And they were on what I believe was a large general rate that has some significant, implications, and which we don't have discretion to take them off of unless they're using less energy, which they're not. And so we started to look at this with the efficiency team and thinking about ways we could mitigate. And this is actually probably the best way we can help, is to make them eligible for the Energy Assistance Program. And we've kept the criteria very strict in the sense that, you have to meet certain criteria to be a part of this, but it really does fit within the spirit of this program to say, if you're a nonprofit entity serving the unhoused community, you should be getting this Energy Assistance Program discount. So that was the first impetus. And then the second impetus, as I mentioned earlier, we've had, in some cases, affordable housing providers who pay the electric bill for the residents. And we have not been able to get some of them on the assistance program. And James has spent actually a good bit of time working with a few of the providers in the community. And so the tariff changes here are meant to give us the flexibility to get those providers into the Energy Assistance Program, provided, and this is a key point, I think, for us, that the benefits of the program be passed directly to residents. I think there's been some discussion of, hey, we're providing a good service to the residents, so you should give us the Energy Assistance Program discount. But for us to be able to justify it, we need to know that it's going to directly benefit those residents more so than if we didn't provide it. And so there's a bit of a causation balance that we're trying to maintain here. So I just wanted to share that those come out of real-world conversations that we're having with affordable housing providers, residential shelters in the community, and are trying to be responsive to those needs. And we can walk through the changes if it's helpful or.
Sure, yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so do you want me to share a screen, or you want to follow along, or how would you like
I don't
to
have
do
it on, I'm having a hard time getting something like classic Outlook here, so. I think
Okay,
I'll put it on
then
the
I
screen.
can share. Let me just pull up the right
And then folks at home can
page
see
of
this as
the,
well.
oh, actually, here we go. I have it
Picture
here,
yours.
here. So, Darren, did you mention the net metering change?
I didn't.
You didn't, okay. So
I did not.
So with this tariff revision, we're actually going to try to accomplish two things. First is the support for affordable housing and housing for unhoused or formerly unhoused individuals. And the second thing is we are changing the rate to make it available to net metered customers, which it had not been available to before. I'll take the first one first because there's really only one red line strikeout here. It's just taking out this non-net metered customer. When we first made the rate available, the billing team was just not sure how it was going to work with net metered customers because it's kind of getting a discount, and they were afraid of, there's a lot of calculations in the billing system that are done for net metered customers, and I think they just wanted to make sure that we wouldn't have problems. We've since taken a closer look at that, and we are confident that it will work fine. So we're going to open this up to net metered customers. Not sure how many net metered customers we have that would qualify, but if there are any, they would be eligible for the rate.
I think there's at least one
Yeah.
that we know of.
Yeah. And the second thing we're doing, as Darren mentioned, is expanding it to certain customers beyond residential, that are not on the RS rate. So in order to do that, we taking out references to the RS rate, and we're also saying that the discount would be applied to demand charges as well as energy and customer charges, because the commercial customers may have demand depending on their rate. So the terms and conditions for the residential customers are essentially the same. We're just specifying that these are eligibility verification methods for residential customers only. And then we're adding the second term and condition here. Oops. Sort of split in an awkward way, sorry. That we may enroll in the EAP rate customers that are nonprofit entities that provide housing and pay electricity costs for residents who meet the 185% of federal poverty level income eligibility threshold for the rate. These nonprofit entities may include shelter providers serving unhoused populations or affordable housing organizations. And if for affordable housing organizations, they'll be eligible for the rate, provided that they can document to Burlington Electric how they will pass on the additional or new benefit from participation in the rate to the income eligible residents. So, example, a multifamily affordable housing project where the electric bill is paid centrally, and then the residents contribute to the electric costs through their rent. We would want to document that that landlord or property manager is going to pass on the benefit of the EAP discount to the tenants in the form of lower rent, or how, some other way of passing on that benefit. And that is really it. And then there's a small change at the bottom, just cleaning up language around the operating guidelines. Are there any questions?
Surprising no one, I have a question. Sorry. Two-parter. One is when you mentioned that, well, let me make a statement first. This is awesome work. Auto-enrolling people in these programs and now taking it even further, like, kudos to you all. This is really terrific. So really appreciate your work on this. My question is, you mentioned, Darren, when you were talking about the nonprofit service provider, that they had a general rate. Is that a commercial rate or is that a residential rate?
Commercial.
Okay. So when this fully refers to residential, does it still square with someone who, like, how does that work? Because this is really clearly RS and that it wasn't.
Section, yeah, let me reshare. So section, or the terms and conditions 1 is for RS, but then terms and conditions to number 2 now is saying we may enroll in the EAP rate customers that are nonprofit entities. So non-RS.
Sort of accepted them from that.
Yeah.
Okay. Didn't understand that it meant that, so thank you. The second part is, in light of that, could UVM say we have income eligible students who live in the dormitories that we pay the electric bill for? Would they as a nonprofit institution or other institution be able to utilize this as written to get a reduced rate?
I think the intent with that latter provision around affordable housing was that you are an affordable housing provider, which I don't believe the university is considered.
That's how I was planning it, certainly.
If you think of affordable housing provider, we'd be talking about Champlain Housing Trust, Cathedral Square, Burlington Housing Authority, Evernorth, those types of folks. So I don't think the university would fit within that definition. Now, if they
provide,
had, resident who paid the bill who was eligible, they would be able to sign up for the program.
right, they provide rent at below market rates is really the intent.
We can clarify it though, because you haven't voted on it yet.
Understood. I wonder if that would be worth clarifying, because you all are the experts, but if it says such entities may include, and it doesn't say, I'd have to give it a more careful read, but.
I think the likelihood of UVM being able to demonstrate that they'll pass that discount on to their students seems unlikely too. Because again, we don't have to accept those people. They have to prove to our satisfaction that the benefits flow to the tenant, not to the landlord.
Yeah,
And also, you have to have a situation where all residents of the building are income qualified, right? If it's a centrally metered property, right? In order for the full property to receive the discount on that single property's bill, everybody living there has to be income qualified, because we're not getting into prorating, like, you know. Yeah.
I don't have it in front of me, but is that spelled out in there? Because then that would pretty much make that question moot.
I'd be open, it's an interesting hypothetical. I don't think it's likely, but I'd be open to making clear that this is for buildings where, as Emily just said, all residents are income qualified. So I think that would eliminate the example that you just referenced.
Go
It
ahead.
might not, though.
Well,
Because what if
UVM?
it's like a graduate student housing or married student, because students by almost always meet the poverty.
What if the reverse was true? What if they were inclusive and you could prove that they were income eligible? Is that a conflict? We don't know the magnitude, but is that?
That's a good point, too.
Yeah, I mean, the goal, right, is to pass along the benefit to eligible residents.
Right.
To make sure, and if they're eligible individually, there's no question. So this is just
Right.
for situations where you're in a building where you don't pay the electric bill, and we want to make sure that they're getting the benefit.
On the benefit.
So, yeah, also a fair point, that we hadn't contemplated that hypothetical. There might be a version of it where it really makes sense to try to pass through the savings. There might be a scenario where, it would be a concern because it wouldn't be implemented the way we had thought.
If you wanted to start slow, you could is there a certain type of certification that Champlain Housing Trust, or is there a way that they're identified, a tax identification, or, I don't know.
But your question implies that residential housing on UVM's campus is considered apartments, and they're not. They're exempted because they're dormitories. They're exempted from ordinances, and I think it's just a different kind of housing.
And is that
Former
true for
permitting
Champlain?
official.
It's true for Champlain dormitories.
Yep. And all students are in dormitories or they're off campus. And that's true, and so UVM's the same, there's no apartments, there's only dorms.
Will they lease?
In Burlington. There's apartments in South Burlington.
Okay, and probably Winooski too, maybe, but, all right, then, yeah, but it's a good question, Andy, 'cause-
It is a good
Yeah.
question.
Yeah.
Interesting hypothetical.
Just as a follow-up, I mean, I intend to support this as written. I'm not gonna make a motion or anything like that. I defer to the experts at BED, but I just wanted to raise the question, so, and
Yeah, do you want to
I
propose, to tweak this, just?
I guess we could leave it as is, but we can always come back if implementation ends up different than what we expect. And again, like, the goal is to pass on the savings, so regardless of which organization was working, whether it was UVM, Champlain, anybody, if there's an opportunity to pass savings to eligible customers who need the assistance, we want to make that happen. We don't want to have the program take on a scope that we hadn't envisioned, which I also appreciate, but perhaps we give this a try from an implementation standpoint. If there are unintended consequences that, materially shape budget impacts, things like that, we'd come back to you. There's always the opportunity to further amend to address unintended, issues. But I appreciate you raising it.
Particularly, Darren, in the case of a pilot rate, where this can be amended anytime during the pilot period as quickly as by sending a letter to the PUC.
This is a
This is a permanent rate.
Oh, I'm sorry, we're doing this to the permanent. I'm sorry, I apologize.
But we can still amend it at any time.
Well, but then it would only take effect with the approval of the PUC, so I would qualify. Careful about that.
The trepidation I'm hearing here gives me pause. It makes me wonder if we should give the department a little bit of time. I mean, is there an opportunity to give time to, or desire to give time to maybe rework this a little bit to take out any ambiguity?
Well, I would propose that the commission approving this does it obligate the department to act on it? Or could BED staff review, you know, after we passes the commission, decide whether to move it forward to the PUC or not, and if upon further review, you decide that you want to bring it back to the commission, then we could revisit it, but I also similarly don't want to delay it.
Yeah, to be transparent, it's on the Board of Finance agenda for Monday.
Yeah.
So
And also, sorry.
well, I don't want to
Also, I
represent that
think-
we wouldn't advance it if you approve it.
Yeah, also, I do think that practically speaking, it's probably the city council approval that is the final approval. So, I mean, I don't know if it could be amended between this approval, as long as what the city council approved didn't change before filing. That's just a question, but I'm saying, I think you're recommending it to them, but they're the ones that actually approve it.
I feel comfortable with the intent and the, you know, I think the question is, if there is a loophole of such, that is it going to be exposed to a high volume or major risk? And I think that the answer seems to be, from your knowing your customer base, that it's probably pretty minor. And so I guess the question is, just as you implement it, thinking about that would be.
I'm just looking at the word may,
Right.
which I think you flagged, Commissioner Boda.
Right. So
You
just
could
change
you
that
could
one word.
literally eliminate that word, and it would say such entities include shelter providers serving unhoused populations or affordable housing organizations. And that was the intent of the amendment, was to support those two specific purposes, those two specific providers. So
So we
maybe that would
strike-
remove the ambiguity to
Could
some extent.
strike may.
In number 2, I guess it's line 2. If we struck the word may, I think you'd have greater clarity about who this is going to directly affect. And I don't oppose the commission making that change if that's a desire.
Just
That
not-
brings up, do we make that amendment now, or kick the can to the city council with them knowing what we've just talked about? I think
I think we would do it.
we could, let's,
Can I ask one question before we
Sure,
get
no,
there? You know, is there anyone in a future state in the next year that would preclude then, if we say it's not May?
I don't really think so. I mean, not that we're intending to try to help here. I mean, there may be scenarios that come up where we say, hey, we're missing something and we want to include, somebody else. But this was really intended for the shelter population, providers, and then certain affordable housing organizations. And, if they're willing to pass on the benefit to the affordable housing, units to the residents, whether it's a building where everybody is income qualified, or whether it's, half are income qualified and they're willing to pass on the benefit to those half, and we prorate the assistance program value based on how many residents are in the building, I think we can do that. Because we can only provide it to residents who are income qualified.
Now getting back to the dorms.
It's complicated.
Yeah, I'm not sure we can prorate. 'Cause
Well-
you're applying a rate characteristic, a billing code to a meter, to an account.
Well, if you
right?
knew how many
No, you
residents
can't- I
are
don't-
qualified versus how many total,
No,
I mean,
I don't think you can prorate because the tariffs don't permit proration themselves.
but are we aware of scenarios where an affordable housing provider, I'm kind of looking at Ita, but like where affordable housing provider who we're talking about here would be serving a market rate and a income qualified population in the same building and paying the electric bill for all?
Possibly, yes.
Okay,
But that information, we know
Right.
that there are apartment buildings that have
Right.
market rate. And because they have market rate units, wouldn't,
they wouldn't be eligible.
yeah.
Yeah, so we're not gonna end up covering everybody.
I mean, you could change the tariff to permit proration, but you would have to explicitly state it.
Well, that'd probably be another level of conversation that we hadn't.
Oh, I know,
contemplated.
but I'm just saying, I'm not saying it's impossible, I'm saying it's impossible as it's written.
Yeah, I guess from my standpoint, I would support removing the word may, to be clear about who we're trying to reach for this particular amendment, but it'd be maybe worth a longer term exploration of those other, market and income qualified rate buildings. And if we're missing customers who might be eligible, trying to figure that out. And we could take that as another step kind of down the road in the process. But I think if we remove the word may, we'd perhaps address the initial issue that you'd
The
raised.
student issue, because what about a frat house? Because they're not a dorm, right?
Interesting, yeah, I don't know.
And then they're
They're definitely not an affordable housing organization, so we would If we remove the word may, we would
Right,
probably
but I bet
cover
you,
ourselves,
yeah, yeah.
It's a fair point.
Question, so if we remove the word may, we don't risk excluding anybody that would be benefit from the intent of this, right?
No, I think we've identified that there may be other examples where this particular iteration may not reach, where we may want to further expand in the future, but we're not missing any of the residential shelters that we were originally hoping to support, and I don't think we're going to be missing some of the affordable housing providers that we were talking about supporting. There might be these other examples where we need to further expand the language down the road.
I like the idea of just for, just to feel, just to think about it for a minute after, like, once we
Right.
remove that word, but then think about it for a minute after to understand any other broader reach
Yeah.
or positive impact it could have if you think about it through those other lenses.
And I think our approach has always been to incrementally improve the program, knowing that it's a lot harder to expand it overbroad, and
Right.
to the point tonight, and then have to kind of
Right.
retract versus expanding stepwise, making sure we understand the impacts and the benefits, and then continuing to grow from there. So that could be a good next step conversation. But yeah, I think removing the word may will address that issue hopefully for tonight.
I know. Go ahead. I was just gonna say, I also just wanted to echo Commissioner Voda's comment about it being really fantastic and a great evolution, so
Thank you.
appreciate it.
Should I make a motion now to amend this? So I
I-
move
I-
that we amend the.
Well, do we have a motion on the table? I don't even think we have a motion on the table yet, anyway.
I think
So
we
you
have to
can
move
make
to
a
that
motion
before you
with
pass.
a provision,
Oh, yeah.
right? I don't
Okay,
think
so
we have
we-
anything on the
so
table at the moment, do we?
And then motion pass.
Make your motion inclusive of the removal of the word may.
I think from a Roberts Rules
Right, or
standpoint,
something.
if you wanted to move the approval and recommendation to the city
And
council
then-
with the amendment of removing the word may, I think you could do that in one
One
step.
Who's the parliamentarian here anyway?
Elena.
And I just want to clarify, that it's removing the word way in may in the terms and conditions point 2?
Yes, on, where it says such entities may include, it would just say such entities include shelters providers, shelter providers serving unhoused populations, or affordable housing organizations. That would be the new sentence.
Okay.
Forgive me with the track changes.
All right, Andy, you stirred this.
So lead us out of it.
You make the.
Okay.
Emily
So
wrote it.
Can I make the motion now, Scott?
I think so.
Okay.
Can you?
We'll see. I move to recommend that the Board of Finance and City Council authorize BED to submit the proposed changes to the Energy Assistance Program Tariff with the removal of the word may in item 2 under terms and conditions as discussed to the Vermont Public Utility Commission for approval.
Sounds
Second.
pretty solid to me.
Okay.
Second? Discussion on the motion? Hearing none. All in favor of the motion indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed indicate by saying nay. 5 ayes.
Thank you.
And I would definitely suggest that that be a part of the discussion with the city council, for them to also take a look at.
Yep.
And contemplate further.
Very good.
Cool, all right. Item number 10, rec process reforms.
It's really trying us tonight.
Okay.
Yes, we have a lengthy agenda. I'll just start out by saying, I know we've discussed this issue a few times in executive session because we were working to settle contract obligations with counterparties. Those have been now settled, so that's why we can discuss this in public session. What you have in the packet are 2 items. One is a memo from us to the Department of Public Service Commissioner outlining the steps in terms of what the issue is here, as well as the steps we undertook from a process reform standpoint. And that's what we're focusing on primarily tonight, is process reforms that we've undertaken through, I think it was 4 fairly lengthy multidisciplinary, multi-division meetings at BED involving policy and planning, generation, finance team members, Center for Safety and Environmental Reporting members. Emily helped to lead that process from start to finish, and it was very, very detailed. And then you have a process, business process document that shows the new outline for not just RECs even, but also environmental reporting categories. So we reviewed every type of generation, both those that we own and operate and those that we contract for. What were the steps to make sure that the RECs are appropriately qualified and utilized? We looked at the environmental reporting of various units that we have and obligations that we have. And the key thing is that we do not want to see an error that was made happen again. And so the entirety of this process was aimed at creating multiple people being involved in each of these steps, centralizing, in some cases through Bitwarden, the ability to have shared credentials and passwords where appropriate, making sure that multiple people have the ability to log into various systems, making sure that there are backups to individuals who, if that position is vacant, or if somebody for whatever reason doesn't undertake a process they're supposed to take, there's a backup who can do it. And then there's verification process, including with management and appropriate calendar reminders, which we have now on our calendars, showing up saying somebody should check on this or check on that, make sure that it's been completed. So I think we've added, in some cases, 3 or even 4 or 5 individuals to all of these different steps to avoid having the issue that happened last summer happen again in terms of REC impacts. I do want to make a couple key points just relative to the conversation we've been having tonight. So obviously, because of the error that's discussed in the memo, we have some reduced REC revenues, which were mentioned in the financial statement discussion. In our budget projections, not the presentation tonight, but our ongoing active projections, we're projecting to come in with a net income that's fairly close to budget expectations, despite the reduced REC revenues, and that's in part because we are seeing some offsetting positives in the budget, including from higher sales. So on the one hand, we would obviously prefer not to have had this error have occurred and to have those REC revenues at full value. On the other hand, I guess we're fortunate to be in a position where we actually have a budget that's performing well enough to withstand that. We are not seeking to amortize this reduced revenue over any period of time through an accounting order. It'll be absorbed fully in FY25. Because of that, it is not, and I want to just emphasize this point, it is not contributing to the FY26 rate need in any way. The rate need is being driven by the FY26 operating revenues and expenses. And this was a one-time issue in FY25, has no bearing on future operating revenues or expenses. So that's an important point to be aware of. So happy to dive in on any of the kind of business process pieces here. Happy to go into further detail around the issue itself if that's helpful. But we have met now with the Department of Public Service. We've taken their feedback on the business process document, incorporated into the version that you have here. And we do appreciate their support for us in the context in which we were advocating for regulatory treatment in Connecticut, which was not successful. So these McNeil recs from Q3 of 2024 will be utilized in Vermont towards our Tier 1 obligation, which has some offsetting mitigation value from a financial standpoint. I don't know, Emily, if you have anything you want to add to any of that, or if not, I think it might be productive for us to ask if the Commission has questions on the documents, and we can dive into any details that you'd like.
Sorry, I think you just said this, but I just want to confirm. So Commissioner Johnson and the rest of the department are the conversations were fruitful and complete?
Yeah, I want to say there was a desire on their part, as well as our part, to make sure that we undertook the reform review, as well as the part of the mayor and the administration. We've shared this with the city council as well over email so that they have copies of these documents too. I think that the discussion on these points were productive. We did get a few discrete pieces of feedback from the department team, which we were happy to incorporate. And, we have also worked with the department team on the appropriate treatment for the recs in the Vermont context, which is something that we haven't done with these particular recs in the past, but they'll be part of our 2024 compliance for Vermont. So, yes, there's no outstanding items at the moment on this with the department. Those conversations are complete, And certainly we're productive, and we appreciate their, feedback for us on this as well.
I have one more question.
Yeah.
The memo's dated April 18th, and I think there was a still outstanding you have the last response you were waiting. Is there an update there? Did you just say that?
Well, yeah, so we've kind of run through all the alternatives in Connecticut and not received any favorable responses
okay,
there,
sorry.
unfortunately.
Yep.
So subsequent to that memo being written to the commissioner, we had tried to exhaust some last avenues
one,
for
yep.
remedy, and there was not interest in the Connecticut regulatory process, unfortunately.
Thank you for the update.
Absolutely.
Any other questions?
Do you foresee this affecting any future rec sales?
No, and that's an important point too. As Emily mentioned earlier, we have completed the process with our counterparties to make sure that we've provided the appropriate recs, appropriate vintage. So there were no contract issues, there were no, market reputation issues as a result of this. So no, I don't anticipate that this will impact us in that way.
We have delivered all of our obligated sales except one, and that's just waiting for Green Mountain Power to give us some recs to finish it up because we do shared sales with them. But essentially, we've closed out all of our obligations for 2024 rec sales.
Any other questions, concerns, comments? Going once? Okay, thank you. Onward and forward, right?
Thank you.
Okay, item number 11, general obligation bond.
Easiest item of the evening, by far.
Yeah. So the authorization to issue, for the city, to issue a general obligation bond of $3 million annually for the purpose of funding capital improvements to the electric plant is in the city charter. However, to use that annual authorization or to issue those bonds, the approval of the recommendation of the Electric Commission is required, and then that will then pass to the City Council to be included in the city's annual general obligation bond issuance, which they usually do in the fall. So when we present the budget to the commission, traditionally we've also requested that the commission provide that annual authorization for the $3 million general obligation bond. And that is all. I think there is a motion in your packet. But I'm happy to answer any questions.
Standard operating
Before,
procedure thing
yeah,
we do,
before you
yes.
take it up, I am happy to answer any questions about it.
Thank you.
Questions, concerns, a motion of whatever the board's pleasure is.
I'd be happy to make a motion. I move to recommend to the Board of Finance and the City Council to authorize and direct the Chief Administrative Officer to pledge the credit of the city by issuing general obligation bonds or a bond anticipation note, BAN, in the amount of $3 million for the 2026 fiscal year for capital improvements, additions, and replacements for the efficient and economical operation of the electric department.
I have a motion to the second.
Second.
Motioned and seconded. I'll also again entertain discussion on the motion, if any. Hearing none, all those in favor of the motion indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed indicate by saying nay. 5 ayes, no nays, the motion passes.
Thank you.
Item number 12, moving on.
I realize I probably should have mentioned this in the initial
Yes.
agenda setting, and I forgot to look down the line to item 12, but it appears this may not be necessary.
Okay.
Okay.
Mainly because we've understood that because the renewal is based on the same terms as the prior line of credit, and we've set it up to be an annual renewal but a 2-year term, Our understanding from bond counsel, whom Emily has spoken with, is that the CAO can approve this item and it doesn't need to go through Commission, Board of Finance, and City Council. Is that correct?
Yes. As you may remember, we negotiated a new line of credit
Right.
agreement last year with M&T Bank, and as part of that agreement, we made some changes to the structure of the agreement with the terms and conditions. And the agreement or the note allows the chief administrative officer, when authorized by the city council, to borrow $10 million for BED. And then the line of credit agreement allows every year there to be an extension of the maturity date by 1 year. And I'll just read you that the city council resolution passed last year says that the loan may be renewed so long as the note for such loan matures within 2 years. The mayor, CAO, director of finance, and assistant director of finance at the city are hereby authorized and empowered to deliver the note together with any renewals as and when the loan is renewed as is applicable. So I think we kind of sorted this out with bond counsel this week. Traditionally, we've brought sort of every extension to you, but the way that the terms and conditions are written, we don't need to. I can share that M&T has indicated that they are willing to extend the maturity date by 1 year and that they'll be doing so on the same terms. Given market conditions in another year, that may be different. They may say, yes, we'll extend, but these will be the new interest rates for borrowing if you do use the line, for example. So they retain the right to propose different terms for the extension, but this year they have not indicated any changes.
Yes, we're good.
Yeah.
No action taken by us, but appreciate the explanation of what's going on.
Mhm.
Cool. That moves us to the last item, which is the Commissioner's check-in. Is there anything that we've missed, forgotten, not quite?
We do have a real-time update for Commissioner Voda on the NOx catalyst, if you're interested.
Sure.
Sure.
So it turns out, Manir looked into this during the meeting, it actually isn't overspent, it's actually underspent because we weren't able to complete it during the spring outage. It's going to be moved into fiscal '26 as part of the fall outage. So I think we
all kind of read it
Yeah.
backwards, the information in the packet.
So
It was budgeted at 400 and something, but actuals are 250 something.
because we haven't completed the installation
Yeah,
process.
yeah.
So wanted to share that in real time since we had it. Thanks, Manir.
Thank you. So, but the capital item was above budget, right? And that was
No, it's actually
I
below.
think
We all
it's
kind of.
50% of budget is the
Okay.
way it should be read.
Yes.
I'm not sure I can't remember exactly what the language said in the slide, but.
Maybe solve 118% of production line,
I see.
Yes.
unrelated.
Yes.
Unrelated, yeah.
All generation capital overall is overspent, but the note says timing, catalyst replacement for NOx at the McNeil plant, 450,300 versus actual.
I see.
225.
I see.
So
Okay.
it does, it should say maybe 450, budget of 450 versus actual of 225, 500. So,
Got it.
yeah.
So and is the FEMA reimbursement in now?
Yes, it's arrived in the month of, most of it, I think, will be recorded in April. I can't remember. We got 2 payments, so I think one will definitely be recorded in April, and I'm fuzzy on whether the second one will make it into April if it came in May.
Got it. Okay.
Yeah.
So when that all shakes out, we should see that all kind of land near budget, is what you're saying?
We're
Yeah.
projecting to be within, I think current latest projection was projected to be within 200,000 to 300,000 of budget for net income.
For net income.
Right.
Great.
Yeah. This is capital, so.
No, I know.
Yeah.
But for net income. 200,000 to 300,000 roughly, latest projection.
Great, thank you.
Assuming no pandemics in the next month or two, because that happened to us around this time of year in 2020. Things fell apart, but assuming smooth sailing, that's where we should land.
Great, thank you for the update. Appreciate it.
Anything else that we haven't covered or missed or, comes to mind? All right, well, that was a very productive meeting, a lot got done there, a lot got kind of figured out, so I appreciate everyone's effort and really good questions and really got some really good meat on the bone tonight, is my feeling. So I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
I motion to adjourn.
Motion?
Second.
Seconded? All in favor, indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed, say nay. We are adjourned. Thank you for joining us, folks.
Thank you.